I was told by someone whose opinion that I care about, that I may be overstaying my welcome a bit on the conversation of how to start, how to choose what to start with, and where to go. And I agree with that. Um, but I want to give one last final moment to the conversation before I move on to other things, I guess. So, hello, welcome to the podcast. Today, I want to talk about we're going to go over a couple things, but this podcast I would say is for someone who I guess wants someone who wants to I don't want to say no, yeah, someone who wants to do more with their life maybe. Well, it's we're going to go over a couple things. I have a couple things that I want to talk about this week. Um but I would say this podcast might be worth your time if you're interested in hearing about, I guess, how to get over. I'm not going to tell you how to get over that hump. That's something that's too individual to the person to talk about for me, but I'm going to tell you my experience with it. And I think I don't give myself enough credit in how many things. Oh, I don't want to say how many things because that's literally what I would say that's one of my problems with starting things is how many things I want to start. But I don't give myself enough credit for what I've been able to start and follow through with. And I think when you're looking at yourself, it's you hold yourself to a higher standard, as you should. But one thing I would never tell anyone ever is to lower your standards for yourself. You might not hit them all the time, but never lower them. I think the pressure that comes from the standards you set for yourself, wherever those standards might stem from, isn't a bad thing as long as you learn how to manage the expectation of it. Maybe there's a difference between standard and expectation, but that wasn't the intention of what I wanted to talk to today. But that's okay. That's okay. Anyways, um, yeah. So I guess where I want to start is okay. Yeah, like I was saying, I don't think I give myself enough credit for what I've been able to start and follow through with. And a big problem that I experience personally is wanting to do so many things. And I don't think I could talk about how to deal with that part of it because it's still something that I struggle with constantly. Um, something that's, I guess, constantly, or that I tend to hang over my head a lot, uh, or that distracts me a lot is this like unsatiable need to want to do um everything. And I don't again, this isn't something that I can fully talk to yet because it's still something that I'm experiencing, but from what I've experienced so far and what I've gathered so far from that is I guess it's I can't tell you if it's possible to do everything or not. Um Obviously there's a choice that has to go within that, but all of it really is a matter of priorities. And I think life happens in phases, and in certain parts of your life, you're gonna have to choose between different things to prioritize. And the person who's able to focus on one thing for a period of time is going to have more success with that thing than the person who wants to do multiple things at once. Now, on the other hand, you could be like, well, life is about experiencing things. So if I want to do everything, maybe it's worth not being the top in one thing. But that's what I'm figuring out. I guess, as I go. But again, that's not what I wanted to get into today. I want to give a little props to myself because this is the first time I've been able to actually like go right into talking. But I do still need to like pause and gather my thoughts sometimes. But we're on episode 4, I think, and I'm already seeing progress in my ability to talk on the spot a bit better, gather my thoughts, convey my thoughts and everything, which I think this is a side tangent. Um, but whether you want to share what you have to say or not, it's a good practice to have. In my experience, I've seen benefits from it. I know other people have seen benefits from it, but either writing down or recording your thoughts. Writing down, I think, helps more with processing them, but recording them helps a lot with articulating that and like saying it out loud pushes you to put what you've experienced into something more comprehensible. And the ability to do that is something that'll help you in whatever you're choosing to do with your life. I'm going to focus in on one specific roadblock that's not deciding what to choose that I've had to overcome when it comes to starting things. And if you've ever said to yourself, I'll start when, insert whatever thing at the end of that, then this might help you, hopefully. But I think that's a trap that a lot of people get stuck in, myself included, is waiting for a specific circumstance to take action on something or start to do something, waiting until you're in what you think is a better circumstance than where you are now. Unfortunately, there will never be a better time than where you are right now. And there's no time like the present. The present. Pre- yeah, there's no time like the present. There's there really is a lot of wisdom in the little things that like just kind of are said if you pay attention to it, but that's I don't know. That's just a thing. Uh but the other thing that I've found comes with that is once you take those first steps, you can let your mind, your thoughts, your ideas get ahead of where you are. I recently started reading The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. It's it's a great book. Highly recommend it if you want to do any sort of creative thing with your life. Um, which makes sense. It's probably arguably one of the number one books recommended in that area anyways, but I'm going to be the typical person and recommend it as well because there's a lot of, as one would expect by the title, there's a lot of wisdom in that on the creative process. And something that resonated with me from it, and I don't have the exact part of it because I didn't look before this, but it's on the scarcity behind ideas. or the scarcity mindset that we adopt in the beginning phase, that we might adopt in the beginning phases, because our mind gets ahead of where we are right now. And what I mean by that, to make it a little bit more clear, is if you get an idea for a project or something you want to do when you're first starting out with learning a new skill or starting something new, it might be tempting to convince yourself to hold off on doing that because your current skill level isn't going to match the output of the idea of the thing that you have in your head. And obviously, there's some logic behind that. That it makes sense, which is why it's easy to convince yourself of that. On the other hand, the I think that the idea will be best executed when it's young in a way, uh, when it initially sparks. The longer you sit on that, the longer you wait to make it into something physical, the I think the more struggle you'll have with it. And obviously nuance to this, but in general, especially when you're starting out, and I think uh, there's two different parts to stopping yourself from doing something after you started, from taking on a project or some sort of something like that, I guess. Um, and one of them is where the expectation or the idea you have in your head, it's not going to align with what you're doing. So you stop yourself from doing it because you want it to look like what you have in your head, but you've built up an expectation for what you want it to look like. You know that where you are right now isn't going to be able to do that. It makes it really hard to do it. Don't attempt it. Again, there's logic behind that. Waiting a little bit until you've developed your skill set more isn't a bad thing. The other side of that is maybe you don't want to do it because of what I was getting at before, the scarcity mindset. And what I mean by that is thinking that you're not going to have a better idea or a better opportunity. So stopping yourself from taking action on this one idea or opportunity, maybe it doesn't apply to opportunity, but taking action on this one idea, waiting for the right time to take it because you don't think that there's going to be something better out there, versus believing that you will be able to come up with better ideas, create something better afterwards. This isn't the only option, so pursuing it anyways, getting it out there, and moving on to the next project. And so how I've experienced that, hopefully to make it a little bit more clear, because it's a bit of an abstract idea, I think. But for me, if I have something that I want to say, and I have a lot of things that I want to say, um, sometimes I feel like I need to wait because the results and where I'm at right now, for me, don't really align with what I'm able to understand, if that makes sense. Um, I think humbly, I think that my mind is ahead of where I'm at in the sense that I understand, I'm aware of a lot more things. I've almost mentally lived the experience and understand things that typically would come from gaining certain results, maybe, but I can't speak, or I feel like I can't speak on that because I don't have the authority that is gained from the experience to back that up, which I think makes sense because, a lot of my thoughts are probably borrowed thoughts. Anyone's thoughts, every thought, if you think about it, is an original thought. Um, but it's important to be aware of how much of your thought is borrowed and how much do you legitimately understand, because every opinion or belief that you take in should be stress tested anyways under your own experience. I think that I've been able to correlate other people's experiences to what I've done up until this point, and that's given me an understanding of it, again, without some of the results that come from it. But the point of that little side tangent was that I tend to stop myself, or I wait on sharing things because I don't think I have, because I think it's a good idea that I want to be received well, but I don't have the authority to share that idea or to have it received in the way that I want it, if that makes sense. And again, logically, I think that does make sense. I think there's nothing wrong with that belief, but at the same time, I think that that belief comes from the scarcity that if I share it now, then I can't share it later, or that I won't have a better idea later. And that's where the idea from the book kind of hit me. Okay, how can you apply that to wherever you are? Um, that's the other thing that I think I'm good at, um, and makes sense. And someone recently put it into words for me, so I'm gonna share it now. But it's really hard to giving advice doesn't, or taking advice doesn't really make sense. Someone asking for advice doesn't make sense because so many things don't actually make sense really if you think about it, like, fundamentally. So many things that are just ingrained in our minds don't really hold to logic. Um, maybe that's something I'll break down a bit more in a separate episode, but it might be too much of a tangent for this. But what I was trying to get at was taking advice from someone, it takes so much more context than the person giving and receiving advice than we think. How can someone tell you what they think you should do when they don't understand, when they're not in your head, when they don't understand where you've been and where you wanna go? And even if you tell them, it takes so much more to actually understand that. Like, you need so much more information than you think to really understand that. So how do you how do you move forward how do you learn from other people's experiences to move forward in your own life when it doesn't make sense to listen to, like, when you can't really listen to them, when you can't really receive advice from them. And that's why it sucks to get generalized, typical advice from people. And when you hear it, it's like, "Oh, that's I already know that that's repetitive," but that's the only advice that you can really apply to yourself. You just have to apply it in a way that makes sense to you. And where was I going with that? Right. So I was talking about, I'm saying this again because I need to remind myself, but I was talking about what how the um idea of scarcity behind the idea hit me, and I'm going to try and generalize that to someone potentially struggling with the same thing in a way that might help you get over it. And how I want to do that is, I think, okay, like I said, the patience of waiting, the patience it takes to wait, the idea of waiting for an idea, logically, that does make sense. And maybe there isn't anything wrong with that in your situation. I think a good question to ask is, why are you waiting? And actually sitting with that and getting to the bottom of that. And that goes back to what I was saying before about the journaling or recording what your thoughts are. Like, in order to process that, you can't just do that in your head. Your head skips over things. Your head's lazy. You have to, I think, at least, that you have to write that down to actually process it. Write it down or speak it out loud to, like, you have to make it something physical to be able to process it. Um Thinking about it is, you're gonna be too stuck in your head. Like, quite literally, you will be stuck in your head. You have to make it something physical in order to move on from it. I think that's just, like, almost part of, I don't wanna say physics, but it's, like, almost a science in a way. I'm sure there is a science behind it. Yeah, but, where I was going with that is, uh, if you're maybe struggling with something similar to what I had, or working through something similar to what I have, uh a question to ask yourself is, why are you waiting? And a potential reason could be the scarcity behind the idea, not thinking that there's going to be better coming up, thinking that it's not the right time for something, which again doesn't make sense because obviously it would only appear in your life if you were ready to. That's a little bit that may be a little bit of the spiritual-ish aspect of it. Um but if an idea presents itself, like, that's the other thing that's in the book. If you don't take it, someone else will. Like, it's almost, I don't wanna go too much into this because I haven't fully, figured out my stance on this, but there's an energy to the idea or inspiration or opportunity that's there, that's physical, and you can take that and run with it, or you can wait on it and someone else will, or you'll just get stuck thinking that it's not the right time, and the longer you wait for the right time, the less of the right time it will be because that's that's just how we experience things, I think. I'm gonna wrap this up now, but what I wanna leave you with, or what I wanna take you what I want you to take away from this is to ask yourself what's stopping you. Whatever whatever it is that you're working through right now, and I think it could be anything, wherever you're hesitating in your life, I'm sure there's I if you're watching this, if you've gotten this far, there's likely an area in your life that you're hesitating for some reason. And wherever that is, I think it could be of benefit to actually sit with that and think about what is stopping you. What is what is the thing or multiple things that are getting in the way of you doing that thing? And maybe there's logic behind that, and that's okay, but actually, like, think about the reason why. Before you convince yourself that there is logic behind it, actually think about the why behind it, because maybe the more you think about it, that logic won't actually stand. And I think there's a lot of things in our life that we've convinced ourselves make sense, but when you push back a little bit and think about, and not just think about, but genuinely try to understand and process why you think that makes sense, it makes less sense, and that's not a bad thing. I think you should push into the less sense part of it because you'll probably get further that way. So yeah, that's all for this week. Thank you for listening if you made it this far. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'll see you next time.